You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show on a Black Friday. This is actually, I think, I could be wrong, but I think it's a first for this show, because usually the Thanksgiving special that we do every Wednesday evening before Thanksgiving kind of takes place of our Friday show. That's actually why we first started doing it that way. But we couldn't let the season finale of Andor go by and wait another week, especially because, next Friday is our company Christmas party, so I'll have to either try to pre-record an episode or, I don't know, we'll have to see what we're going to do there. But that's next Friday. Tonight, Andor season finale. So I don't know, this one was really exciting, really pulse pounding. I think it gave me exactly what I wanted out of a season finale. The tension kept building through the entire episode. This is also, by the way, the first episode since probably episode 4 or 5 that I did not take any notes. I'm like, you know what? I watched it. I was going to watch it again and take some notes. But no, I think I'm just going to let, much like the Force, I think I'm going to let the, the conversation and the thoughts just flow. So, what were you thinking about this one?
This was a pretty good finale. I think that it got us to where we needed to be at the end of it all, which I feel comfortable with. That was one of the main concerns. I was like, I hope that, it doesn't leave us like on some weird cliffhanger or something like that. But I really wanted to kind of put us in a good space to begin season 2, which it definitely did. A lot of the monologues in here were really just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that. Like, there were some amazing monologues that were in. Some interesting or creative, I don't know if it was the editing, but I would say the storytelling alone was just creative in some ways, which I really did enjoy. So it was a really good episode for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, honestly, this is one of those episodes where, it's funny because it's the final episode of the season, but I think it really encapsulates everything that Andor was trying to do, what this show was trying to say, the tone, everything. Because there's a lot of really key scenes in this thing that, they not only do they catapult the actual story that we're getting in Andor, but they also add a lot to the whole canon. And then, of course, if anybody, Ronaldo says, hello, my fellow Wookiee friends. So now we're not Jedi Masters, now we're Wookiees. It's no shave November, man.
All right, she puts a bunch of trees in our background.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Hey, maybe Zoom has one of those presets. Well, let's just I'm waiting for this. Here we go. It's like the chat thing's really slow today. Like, it pops up on the YouTube part, but not on our ability to do this. So obviously, Ronaldo loved this episode. Yeah, like I said, man, this episode really was an episode that the tension that just kept building through the entire episode was so amazing to me. And, it was, and again, it was, I forgot which episode it was where we first had the people of Ferrix, with the whole anvil thing, and they were walking around. It was basically when Cyril was attacked. And right. I thought it was cool that Cyril being on Ferrix at this time, he was getting vibes like, hey, something's about to go down. Like, he's like, hey, I've been through this before. You guys might, not telling anybody how to do their job, but y'all might want to do something because something's going to happen. And even more so than that episode, I got more of those vibes that, they were going through the funeral, and you could tell that the Empire was slowly losing the upper hand that they had. They thought they had everything under control, but as that procession was going, and you were just waiting, it was almost painful, so. And then
Go ahead.
Well, I thought that I thought that Deidre also was that character. I thought got a lot into this episode as well. It was nice to see her surrounded by Death Troopers. It kind of gave me Krennic vibes in that.
Yeah, I mean that shuttle when the shuttle landed, it kind of gave me like Vader vibes in a way because every time I see that particular shuttle, I'm expecting Vader to like walk down that ramp. Um, but yeah, it definitely kind of had the Krennic vibe from Rogue One, which I think it almost looked like the same platform in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool. And then like once again, just the gravitas that Deidre commands, like when she walks, like she has that serious demeanor about herself, and she's about the business of everything. There's a lot of different things that uh, even like you said, she has some pivotal roles, and um, I guess we could pick this apart kind of by character, really, for this particular episode
You know, it's
because
funny that you bring that up because I was thinking the exact same thing. They would probably rather than do more of a scene by scene kind of a thing, it's really more of a character by character thing because really that's what this whole episode was, right? Everybody's converging on Ferrix. I mean, except for
hmm
Mon Mothma, but everybody else pretty much is converging on Ferrix, and it's the journey, the emotional journey, the character's journey. It's like, what is driving them? What is bringing them there? Each of the characters have a different reason for being there at that time. And
hmm
so, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that it would probably be better, actually, to just break down the characters and their arc in this episode, which, of course, is tying up their arc for the whole season, because that's definitely, I think, the way to go for this one.
Yeah, this kind of reminded me of like you said, everybody kind of was converging on Ferrix for their own particular reason. It reminds me of the finale of another very popular TV show, Power, and they were all converging upon the nightclub to try to kill Ghost, one of the main character, protagonist, antagonist, like, in some regards, depending on which lens you're looking at. But everybody had a purpose for killing him, and you see everybody walking towards this club, and you're like, okay, well, who's going to get to him first? And so that's kind of what I felt watching this particular episode of Andor was, all right, you have Cyril who's coming, you had Luthen who's on his way there, Deidre's on her way there, um, Andor is actually on his way there, and you have so many different people, like you said, just converging on Ferric. So um, I guess who do you want to start with first?
Ronaldo. Uh,
Okay.
Ronaldo basically says, I love that everyone was on Ferrix, but it didn't feel forced. That's a good point.
hmm
It made sense within the context of the story. Well, I mean, I think the obvious person to start with first would probably be Andor himself, right? Because he really
Okay.
ties into why everybody else is there, to be honest. I mean,
True.
pretty much everybody is there either directly or indirectly for Andor or because of Andor. So he would be the
hmm
one, and his motivation is obvious. He obviously hears about his mother's death, and he's like, okay, I have to go back. And it was really cool when he and who was the dude that was with him in that tunnel, and they were talking. It was I never can remember that
Oh,
guy's name.
the guy with the beard,
Mm-hmm.
the taller guy that's kind of like his friend.
Yeah,
I don't know if we really got his name. Maybe.
I'm sure there was,
And
but
they might have mentioned it like really quick, but it's
I'm
not
sure.
his name wasn't mentioned enough to, for it to catch on, but
And especially,
that
yeah,
guy.
for us. I mean, look, we sometimes we forget the names of main characters. We have no hope with this guy. But yeah, when he was talking to him, it was really poignant about how he kept almost trying to convince him, like, hey, I really wanted to take her with me and all that. And then he read that, I don't know, that little, when he basically said, hey, she told me to tell you this. And he basically said, verbatim, um,
hmm
pretty much like, look, man, I get it. You got to follow your own thing. You have more to do. And I think that they're really setting up Andor eventually joining the Empire, which I think is what the final scene was about, honestly, when Luthen
You mean the
finally,
rebellion?
yeah, because when Luthen finally does catch up with him, and remember, not only was everybody there for Andor, but most of the people on the quote-unquote rebel side were actually there to kill him. That's what makes this so ironic, is that he was a loose end. And they were afraid that if he was captured, he might give stuff away.
Well, yeah, that was a hilarious part, is the fact that the rebels, the quote unquote good guys, were there to kill him, but then the Empire wanted him alive, So it's the juxtaposition of that is hilarious.
Yeah, and I mean that's pretty much, and for that final scene, Andor finally is just like, you know what, kill me. Luthen's all like, what, are you serious? It's like, yeah, seriously, kill me. I mean, it's like,
he's like, kill me or take me in. He's like, bring me into the whole
kill me or
rebellion.
take me in. And you could tell that Luthen had some other plans for him. And I think that that's kind of like one of those, maybe I shouldn't kill you. Maybe we can use you in what we're trying to do. Because remember, they're not really the rebellion yet, at least not the rebellion that we know. They're a bunch of different factions that are rebelling against the Empire that have a loose connection to each other, but they're not,
unified.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Luthen. I think he always had the plan for Andor. He wanted Andor from the outset to really join them. Andor just wasn't about it. He's like, look, I don't know you. I just met you, whatever. So Luthen's like, okay, well, look, I'll give you this job. Once you do it, it's over with. And because he did need him for a specific purpose, but I think he always had a thing for like, okay, look, I want Andor to be a part, but he's just not going for it. But okay, if he's not going to go for it all the way in, then at the end of this mission, we'll just, eliminate the loose end.
You will join us or die.
Exactly. And then, so much has happened to Andor along the way of, him pretty much running back into Luthen again, that it's like, okay, his perspective of things have changed now. Just being in that prison, having to, hear about his mother's death and what she wanted for him. And then, now seeing what happened to Bix, it's just like, okay, I see what's going on here. And it's like, look, either kill me so I don't have to deal with this crap, or let me in so we can all deal with this. Cause either way, he's tired of it.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really cool thing.
No, it was.
I like the fact that, I love the speech that the guy gave him, from Marva, that like, okay, she knew everything that he was going to feel and everything he was going to say, but she was like, yeah, forget all that. Like, and one of the things is that was like really kind of pulling in your heartstrings is when she says, I love you beyond any wrong that you think you could ever do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like one of those mother's love moments.
Totally.
Like, man, like,
that one, I have to admit, that got to me a little bit. Well,
yeah,
Ronaldo's got a couple of things that, I just want to get in here before we get to, because once we get in deep, man, we're we're lost. It'll be like another 20 minutes. It's got like 4 things. First, he says, hey, look, there you are. I don't know why that actually popped up like that. But Cyril and Deirdre are a cute, creepy couple at the same time. Yeah, we'll get to that whole thing. And then, of course, he gets to something else that we'll get to when we get to Marvo, which is her speech was just epic. Yeah, I mean, what I could say about that right now is it's kind of like the reverse emperor, really. Kind of reminded me of Palpatine. He goes on to say, I saw a review today saying that Marva was like a light side, Palpatine in that speech. Yeah. And then he also says that he cried during the funeral. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there were so many different character moments in this. And it's not just Andor, right? It's like, because you would think that this is either going to be about Andor or it's going to be about how other characters relate to him. That's what you would think at the onset. But the reality is, these guys are each going through their own journey. Andor is the catalyst, of course, but he really doesn't have a whole lot to do with why some of these people, are there. And, one of the things that I didn't actually put up from Ronaldo that I want to get up here because this is a good point, one I was going to bring up myself. It says, how funny is it that the Empire wants to catch Andor and they literally had him in jail? Right? Mm-hmm. We basically talked about that during the prison trilogy, that the whole time they're looking for this guy, and they have him, and they don't even realize it. And we were talking about that goes into the bigness, the grand scale of the Empire, that you can actually get lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's but of course he wasn't going by his name, so they didn't really know. Now you would think that, okay, if this is worn out for Cassian and his hologram is being passed around all over across these systems, you would think that, well, okay, when they process you into the system, that will come up. Like, at least your face would, you would think that would be happening, but I guess not.
Well, even and keep in mind that this happens. This series is happening like right around the time of Solo. Maybe just after it, but it's literally like right in that time period. And if you remember, even how they, Han Solo goes up there before he has his name, it's like Han, and they're like, all right, you're by yourself, Solo. And then they put him on through. I mean, obviously the security in the Empire is not exactly what it should be, because that was another situation too. He was wanted. They were literally chasing Han through the crowd, and he manages to get up to like some recruitment thing or whatever. And, he gets his name from them.
It, right. I mean, the cool thing, and that's one of the cool things about this, is that we're seeing the budding of the rebellion, but we're also seeing the budding of the Empire, really, in such a way that it shows that the Empire isn't completely flushed out yet. Like, it's dominant. It has the volume, but it doesn't have the precision just yet. And I think that's where we're kind of seeing that in Andor and Solo. But this for Andor, though, I like the fact that he was able to move around Ferrix undetected too. It's like he knows all these little sewers and catacombs that he's able to maneuver through and get to different parts of the city without being identified. So once again, Ferrix is probably the worst part. I mean, I get it from the Imperial standpoint why they would want to try to catch him there, because they figured that's what he'll be because of his mother. But it's also kind of the worst part too, because you're on his turf. Like, you don't know who he knows, what type of relationships he has with those people there. He knows the land very well, obviously. So, trying to catch up with him is a little bit more difficult than what they anticipated.
I think that's the arrogance of the Empire, though. They
Yeah,
figure,
that's true.
Who cares? We're here.
Right.
We'll find you. We're bigger than you. So, because I honestly, like that, when he went up on that little, like, roof thing that was sort of in between the roof and the, that little attic crawl space, like, thing or whatever it was. I mean, I honestly thought, and he was, but I was surprised they found him as fast as they did, because that seemed like it was a really good place, right? He had a vantage point. It wasn't like he was using some sort of a blaster rifle that had a glint of a scope or something that they can see. I mean, he was just pretty much out of sight and pretty much undetectable, but yet somehow, I think it was when they were going to door and they saw that little ladder or whatever, that maybe that's how they got
it was
him.
actually that guy. It was that guy who snitched. The black guy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the one behind it. I won't say the whole thing, but he was behind that aspect of it. Like, okay, that's why he said, "I want double the reward. I want transfer out of here." And he had him like, "Oh, fake like you're arresting me," and and then that's when they kind of gave him up. And Deidre originally didn't want to kind of like pursue it the way that everybody else did. She was like, "No, I need him alive, so let's just do it this way."
Well, and Deidre would probably be another, like, on the flip side of Andor, right? She would probably be the other main major person that we should talk about, at least on the Empire side of things, because her whole reason for being there, obviously, she had become obsessed with catching him. They're still holding Bix. She knows that he's going to come back for, at the very least, Marva's funeral, but she probably figures she's going to, he's going to try to rescue Bix as well, which of course he does. which I thought that was a great scene too. But it was kind of funny too watching her, because one of the things that struck me about Deidre over all the other ones, except maybe that one lieutenant guy that was kind of her rival that was trying to get her in trouble at first.
Yeah, McGregor.
Blevin, I think was his name, like Supervisor
Yeah.
Blevin or something. Well, other than him, she seems to be the one that has the most foresight. Like, everybody else is looking at the surface stuff. She's the one that's actually really putting thought into things and saying, hey, are you guys, do you not see what's going on here? There's something a little bit deeper, and she's trying to get to the bottom of it. And I also thought it was really cool when she's down there and she could see some things are starting to fall apart. I mean, that's one of the things that, and I love this anyway. Anytime there's a movie, I don't know, maybe they'll talk about like a big storm is coming and there's a disaster. And when it's approaching, and then they can tell it's approaching, that time period when they know they only have not too long to prepare between that and the time that it actually hits. I always love stuff like that impending doom kind of thing. And that's what you get here, is that, you know, the procession thing is going, it was going earlier than what they expected. Things are looking a little bizarre. The Empire is still not fully aware of really what's happening, but Deidre knows that something's up. You know, she sees it before everybody else does. And it was interesting to see her go from, you know, like kind of like we were saying, the big bad woman with the death troopers and all that, marching through with that authority, to being a little uncertain, to then being victimized, where she's being trampled and the blasters being kicked away from her, and she's about to be pretty much killed until Cyril actually saves her, which, of course, that was a complete shock to me.
Yeah, I mean that was an awesome scene, and yeah, everything leading up to it with Deidre kind of trying to wrangle everybody and try to like put everybody on the same page, and then when she gets out there, yeah, like her hats get shot off her head, and then she gets trampled, and then now they're basically about to just like stomp her to death, and then she gets picked up by by somebody, by Cyril. I mean, I kind of figured that's who it was going to be anyway, because he's been like watching her like the whole time, and but that moment that they had in that whatever little
Oh man, yeah,
hardware store or whatever, it was just like the tension in that room was just like, okay, and I loved it. I loved the writing in that, because on one hand, you can feel the romantic tension in there, but she's trying to fight it. He's really not, but he's just accepting that she's not going for it. And it looks like it was a perfect opportunity for them to make that happen. And they didn't.
I
And I
know.
love that. I love that choice of not giving us what we thought was going to happen. Like, oh, yep, here it is. It's a perfect kissing moment. It's like Han and Leia, on the Millennium Falcon, and it's like, all right, you're trembling. I'm not trembling. It's like that moment, and it's like, all right, it's about to happen, and it doesn't. So I thought that was brilliant writing on their behalf on that.
And I
And
was just all
then
like, "What? Thank you." You know, it's like, I mean, it was just so hilarious, man.
yeah,
They were so like clumsy. Each one of them not really used to the emotions that, because both of them are really career oriented. You know, they're pretty much diehard. I'm giving up my life for the Empire, and that's part of what actually attracts them to each other. But at the same
yeah.
time, it also makes them trying to demonstrate any kind of real emotion almost impossible, because they really don't know how to express anything that's genuine, you know?
Well, yeah, and the fact that she's once again, it's showing. We talked about the last time when they actually had their first moment, and we saw the different emotions that Deidre had all within like almost like a few seconds. So it was like
Right?
kind of confusion, attraction, but irritation, like all those things happening at one time. Once again, you see it because she had this fear of like, okay, she's about to get trampled. Now she has a gun on her back. She probably thinks she's about to die. So she's fearing for her life. But then there's surprise when she sees who it is. And he's like, you. Then once again, there's the attraction, like, and then there's gratitude. And you're like, but she's still in that, hyper, ventilated moment where, like her adrenaline is pumping so fast that she really can't process everything that she needs to at that time. So
Mm-hmm.
once again, I love that brilliant acting, by her. So yeah, that was really awesome. Cyril's thing was he was more one dimensional. Like I know he was coming there because he knew, okay, Andor's going to be there, and then of course he sees her. Now he's all like, "Oh, it's her. She's here," and it's like, all right. He's kind of his. Although he had a cool scene, and I'm glad they gave him something that we could remember. But overall, his purpose was kind of minimal in this episode.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, his whole arc has been one dimensional. And I was just glad that this is the second episode we get where he's not eating cereal. I was really happy about that.
Right.
But and it was kind of like you. I would have felt a little bit cheated if Cyril hadn't been in this episode. Because they did feature him enough throughout the season that you needed to, if not completely tie up his storyline, you needed to advance it. You needed to, what's the next step with this thing? It's like Ronaldo basically says, Cyril and Deidre's creepy love felt very organic and wasn't forced. It just makes sense. And it makes sense because both of them, maybe Deidre in a way less so because we've seen more of her and we've seen more facets of her, but she basically is still kind of one-dimensional. And that's the same thing with Cyril, is that Cyril, he basically was the one who was investigating the death of his fellow, co-workers or whatever, which was a really big deal to him. And an injustice that you cannot let go. Of course, in the process, he botches that up, so then he gets busted. So now he really wants to get the guy that put him in this situation. Because not only did you kill a couple of my guys, but yeah, exactly. But on top of that, now you cost me my job. It's like I'm in this whole I'm checking on fuel stuff or whatever. I mean, there's a lot that Andor really did to this guy without even realizing it, So, now this is actually kind of funny that Ronaldo says. He says, as creepy as their love is, it's better than Anakin's and Padme's. I mean,
so far, at least.
Well, it's definitely more interesting.
Definitely more interesting.
And I will say this. People could say, that could be a good debate. That would almost be like a good Duel of the Fate. Remember when we used to do those?
Yeah.
Those Duel of the Fates things. Because there's a lot you can pretty much say about that. But here's the main thing that I think everybody, no matter where you land on that debate, I think everybody could agree that this is better written than Anakin and Padme.
Oh, yeah. Hands down.
So,
Hands down.
So Cyril, yeah, his is a little bit more one-dimensional, but like you, I was really glad that they did take the time to advance his storyline, give him a little bit of completion for this season, so that way, and then tease us a little bit about what could be next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm wondering, like I said, in season 2, like we got to see the evolution of like, okay, now it's almost like she owes him one, so like now we have to see how that dynamic is going to play out.
And I think we will. And I mean, again, of course, this is going to be like towards the end of our episode tonight, when invariably, instead of what do you want to see in the next episode, it's like, what do you want to see in the next season? That is one of mine. I could give everybody a sneak peek right now. That is one of my things. I want to see what's next for Cyril, both professionally and then also that relationship between the two.
I think the next person we probably should hit up is Mom Mothma.
No, the next person that we should hit up is Dwight.
Ah,
I love how these chats are coming in with precision
right.
timing that I can say that, and then you say that line, which of course is completely unscripted because that's not what this show is about, right? And it's like the second time I've been able to use that one. Dwight says episode 12 was a nice tie and launch point. And that's actually true because this finale does something that I don't think a lot of finales are successful at doing. Some of them try to, but this one was actually successful at tying up the season 1 story arc and yet tease us a little bit for season 2 and not and maintain a perfect balance between those two things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's and that's the joys of beautiful writing. You know, when you
Yeah.
actually can write something that's really cohesive and you can leave your audience wanting more,
Man,
but at the same time satisfied.
I wish he had written the prequel trilogy, honestly, after seeing
Man,
this.
right.
Can you imagine how much different, like, still have Lucas be the
Yeah.
one to kind of produce and move things along, but man, I mean,
Have Tony Guerrero write and direct.
yeah. Of course, he wasn't a Star Wars fan, so he probably wouldn't have done it, but hey. All right, so who's next on our
Mon
list?
Mothma.
Yes.
So her whole thing, the first we see her, she's in a car with her mole as a driver, and she's picking up her husband Perrin, who apparently she believes has been gambling again. He's got a little gambling problem, and so now they're having this whole argument in the car about his gambling. And
Oh, you didn't
what's
actually you didn't actually get the whole reasoning behind all that?
oh yeah, I was just about to go into that.
Carry on.
Like she's and the fact that she brought that up was because she was using it as a cover for the money that's been missing.
Yeah,
From
and
the
she
accounts
knew
because
she knows that driver dude. Yeah,
driver's listening.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
she
we
knows
need
the
some
driver's
privacy,
listening.
please. It's like, yeah, all right, I see what you're doing.
Oh yeah, she played that card so well.
So well.
And he's all trying to defend himself, like, no, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything. She's like, yeah, you're doing this on course line. I don't need this. People are going to be looking into, like, she's kind of setting in, of course he eventually does what a mole does. He goes back and reports to Blevin about, the conversation that he overheard. And he's like, okay, well, I guess that kind of explains, why there's money missing from certain accounts. So she's trying to cover her tracks and blaming it on her husband's gambling addiction, which I also
Right.
did love the fact that they dropped Canto Bite into that.
I know.
So that
I
was
was just
kind of
about
cool.
to say that too. When she actually mentioned Canto Bite, I'm like, sweet. Now just don't have a scene there.
Mhm.
And
Right.
Dwight basically says, I don't think she thinks he was gambling. Well, I mean, the thing is, here's what was perfect. He is gambling. But what she's doing was she was using that and bringing it to the attention because, like Daryl was saying, the whole subtext behind that is, and again, it shows what a genius. Now you're starting to see why Mon Mothma is one of the main architects and leaders of the rebellion because it's political maneuvering. She's an expert politician. She knows how to do this. And she has to cover her tracks as far as all this spending and all this other stuff goes. So she more or less puts parents gambling and all that stuff, maybe makes it seem a little worse than it is, and puts it out there. Which I thought, yeah, that was so awesome.
Yeah,
I love that, man.
the way he kept trying to, like, no, somebody's lying to you, and her line's like, well, that we can be certain of. Like, she just kept putting it back on him every time he kept trying to say, well, no, we can go back, and someone's using that to get into you but they're using me to do it. And once again, it's that. And she's like, oh, well, watch your voice. And he's like, oh, well, he can't hear us. Once again, it's just she's playing this marvelous, chess match here, and it's almost like solitary chess in a way.
Oh, so good.
And it was magnificent. So
It was
I
good.
really did love that. And then on the flip side, you can see the hurt that she has to deal with when she has to do when she has to give her basically her daughter
The arranged
away
marriage
to
thing?
this the
Yeah.
arranged marriage thing to this guy, which now I get that's what they were doing when they had that whole little Girl Scout meeting in the other room over there. Like they basically were preparing her to be, you know, betrothed, if you will, with this gangster son. So yeah, that was kind of, and you can see like she's winning on one end where she kind of eludes the Empire one, but then you see her kind of take a loss on the other. So
And that's exactly, I mean, I think that you could really almost sum the whole show up like this, but particularly the last couple of episodes, is that for every victory the rebellion gets, they have to suffer a loss or two.
hmm
And so I think that that's one of the things that they're really bringing it home, because, I mean, let's face it, even in the original trilogy, if you read into it, you knew all this. But they never really showed it to you in this kind of detail, obviously. You can't until now. And I think that it's great that we're actually finally seeing this. Ronaldo says, I can actually see Canto Bight working in some way in this type of Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
We're just kind of, taking the wind out of The Last Jedi a little bit, even though I know we shouldn't do that because Ronaldo loves that one. And we like it, we just see problems with it. Ronaldo also says that scene with Mothma is one of many examples where the show knows that the audience is intelligent enough to understand what's happening. That's a point that I wish we had stressed throughout, or I think we did a little bit, but even more so, is that that's true. This is one of the first Star Wars shows. It's giving us a lot of subtext, a lot of subtle plot points, a lot of different things and it's not explaining them. It's not giving you a bunch of exposition. It's just letting you, as a sophisticated audience, pick up on it.
Well, that's why you said, you said this the other night that, this is an adult show. This is
Mm-hmm.
why it's an adult show,
Mm-hmm.
because adults will read into those type of things. Like I said, if you're not as astute, you would not pick up on the Mon Mothma scene. Like, okay, the fact that she was bringing attention to this whole gambling thing, it's like, okay, you really have to kind of read between the lines and really understand the nuances of this particular character in order to glean that. So yeah, I think that's what makes Andor, and I think that's why it becomes more popular for more adults, because it's okay. This is Star Wars for the big boys or to the grown ups here. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, and it doesn't have the fantasy side of it. This is almost very real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's very grounded, and it's not. I mean, really, it's just taking place in the Star Wars universe, and they'll have, you'll see some stormtroopers or Death Troopers or people in Imperial gear. I mean, other than that, it could be any sci-fi show,
hmm
and it's a very smartly written sci-fi show. And this one is a little bit more sci-fi than fantasy, definitely. So, all right, who next? We could go maybe Vel. And we can almost
Yeah.
do Vel and Cinta a little bit together, maybe,
Well,
because
yeah.
they have a similar arc, because naturally they're a couple. But the thing is, it's interesting about them is that in this episode, you see that there's two, like Cinta is about a different, it's almost like their paths are not as one anymore. They're splitting a little bit.
Yeah, the problem is that Cinta is more focused on the mission more so than
Hmm.
the relationship. And I think
Right.
Val is seeing that and feeling that. And that's why, you get when she first sees her, she's like, all right, oh, I missed you too. Like, dang, hello, how are you? That type of thing. Like, she just came in and got right back to work. And she's
Hmm.
like, you didn't almost like you barely even looked at me, just and there's that aspect of the relationship, and Cinta's kind of like, well, look, I had had stuff to do. So, I mean, don't take
It'd
it
be great if she
personal,
was
but
just like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm kind of into dudes now.
I've been following this guy. He's
Yeah,
hot.
right,
You know,
exactly. It's kind of like, kind of was looking at like Andor without his shirt on one day, and just saying. But yeah, she's basically more about the mission, and she's more about, I think, a lot of the things the rebellion are standing for. Because remember, anybody that's associated with the rebellion at this point is basically there to kill Andor. That's pretty much
Mhm.
what the whole thing is. And I think that where it's a little bit separate is Cinta is basically noticing a lot of the nuances of what's going on with this Imperial occupation. Because you notice she keeps bringing up, hey, there's some high-ranking Imperials here. There's some stuff like that. Vel, of course, is dismissing it, as well, duh, Cassian's expected. She's a little bit more focused on the we have to kill Cassian part of things. So I thought that was a little bit interesting, too, because once again, it's showing you this difference where Cinta's more about the greater, I guess, cause of everything, and then Vel is singularly focused on this mission. Let me get Dwight's comment in here because this is relevant to this. He says, Vel is there for the relationship and part-time rebel. Cinta is a rebel. And that's from... I don't know if I would go that far only because of some of the past stuff, but I can also see that that's not necessarily an incorrect assessment, actually, because even if you look at the earlier episodes where she popped up, which I think is like episode 3 and 4, and the whole Aldani thing,
Yeah.
I think that's basically, you got that vibe even then. I mean, Vel was unquestionably the leader, but still, she did seem to be a little bit more about the relationship than the actual thing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's good that you brought that up because, they were kind of having a little introduction, like, oh, this is so and so, this is, and this is Vel, that's Cinta, and even I forgot the character's name, but he basically said like, like as far as killing, like she's the worst one out of all of us. Like you think it's probably like these guys. No, this is the one you don't want to mess with, and that's Cinta. Because she's super committed. Even when they were starting the mission, she said, "Are you going to be okay by yourself?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." Like, she's she's like, "What are you worried about?" Like, like stay focused. It's almost
more like,
that
are you going to be
type
okay
of,
by yourself?
yeah, exactly.
Cinta's like, listen, this whole thing, it gets a little lonely out in the woods. We're not in the woods. Leave me alone. It's
right.
Ronaldo says, it seems that Vel can let go of everything for the rebellion, but not love. Cinta understands that even love needs to be kept away for the sake of the mission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Absolutely.
interesting, and this is where it gets really interesting when you start dissecting, and this is where your level of fandom now comes into question, because my mind starts to wander in when you look at the Han and Leia relationship, because now you got people that are at the very top, right? This is the upper echelon of the rebellion. You're not just some little operative. You're talking about like Leia, who basically is, other than Mon Mothma, she's in charge, At least once the Empire falls. But even during that, it was like they were about the mission, but they seemed to strike more of a balance. They were about the mission, but they were also about each other. They cared about each other. There was balance there. At this point, though, during the rebellion, because it's still in the building phase, and maybe depending on these two characters, there's a little bit of an imbalance there, at least between one of them. So, I don't know. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely because you're in the early stages of it. And that's the thing, is because you're trying to figure everything out as it's happening in real time.
Yeah.
Versus like, okay, when you have a whole infrastructure that's kind of like, all right, and you have people, And that's the other thing too. As far as they know, it's just like, all right, maybe Saw Gerrera and them. And like you said, because there's no unity in it just yet. It's just kind of like, well, there's Luthen, Cinta, myself, and maybe Saw Gerrera, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe
Yeah.
a couple other people scattered around. But I don't know. There's no cohesion. But now, but later on down the line, by the time you get to Leia, you got like this, you got a whole base, you got Yavin 4 out there, you got pilots, you got people running around, man. You got like a whole regime here. So it's not so much stress and work on just those few people.
Well, I mean, with that, let's go into Luthen.
Yeah.
Now, Luthen, he doesn't have a whole lot of screen time in this episode either. But again, there's a vital thing going,
Yeah, kudos on his ship, man. I think it's sweet. Like
I
when you
know.
see it, like actually, like just, I was about to say parked, but I don't know if you can park a ship like that, but
Dock.
whatever.
They actually docked the ship.
Well, anyway, it's when it's landed. Let's put it that way. So now that the ship is landed, and you kind of see like the construction of it. I mean, it's kind of sophisticated, really. When you really look at it, and you could tell he's got some money because of all the different accoutrements that he has on that thing. But Luthen, wisely parks, or lands on the outskirts of the of Ferrix, and then he kind of, rides his bike in, to into
Yeah,
the
this is
city.
sort of like when you're going to a festival, you park in some like department store parking lot for free, and then you take a shuttle. That's what Luthen did.
Yeah, or Uber.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, so Luthen kind of, rides into town, and he eventually catches up with Vel, and is kind of trying to figure out like, okay, well, cool, Andor is supposed to be here. The Empire's here. They're gonna do our dirty work for us. They're gonna find him, and we'll just kill him, and then we'll just get out of there. And his whole thing is just tying up this whole loose end. And as he's walking around though, and he's seeing, once again, he's also reminded of why he's here, but even more so, he's moved when you see him listening to Marva's speech. And that you can see the impact that it's having on him, like, and looking around and seeing the people of Ferrix, and that's just a small town, but this is happening galaxy wide, and it seems to reinvigorate, his purpose of starting the empire. I mean, starting the rebellion, and really what this is about, and probably also softens his heart a little bit towards Andor, even a little bit, because he knows that's his mother.
Oh,
And
unquestionably.
hearing her talk about, yeah, what I'm saying, hearing her talk and basically giving this monumental speech that, inspires this whole town, really is like, okay, this is what we're fighting for. This is why we're here. This is why these things have to be done.
Yeah, it's like, hey, if this woman raised you, you can't be that bad, right? So, but
Right, exactly.
and Marva would be another one that we should get to, but before we do, we need to get to the Empire briefly, because that leads into the Marva thing, and that is, again, I have to give kudos to these writers, to the showrunners, to the director. They've actually done something that that you haven't really seen it as much in Star Wars as you probably should. They've made the Empire scary again.
Yeah.
The Empire is threatening. I mean, when those stormtroopers are open firing on the citizens and stuff,
Man.
dude, they're brutal and they're not missing. And like the violence and the depiction of just the brutality of the stormtroopers,
bashing
the Empire.
people over the heads.
Yeah, man. I mean, Now I will say this, and this is what was really interesting to me when I'm watching everything unfold. First thing that happens is you get the guys with the riot shields. Just totally reminding me of Call of Duty right now, but they were because anybody that's played the new one, Modern Warfare 2, knows the shield guys have an unfair advantage right now. They're nearly invincible. Which, by the way, if you're playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the way to get around that is you get the inflatable decoy. Hey, I'm offering a little bit of gaming advice on the show. just
Oh my God.
but again, what you do is you get the inflatable decoy perk, and then you deploy that basically underneath the shield guys, and then when it pops up, it'll kill him. So you're welcome. But but basically what was interesting is the riot shield guys are like first. And if you look, the Imperial officers are starting to freak out a little bit because they're like, what's going on? The stormtroopers aren't doing anything at that point. Like, the crowd is kind of going wild, and they're just sort of chilling, waiting.
For the order.
For the orders, man. But, man, when they get it, it's just like,
yeah.
Wow.
Open season, man.
Wow. And then Dwight agrees. You know, Dwight's like, yes, these stormtroopers go to the range. It's, I mean, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Because they were not missing. Yeah. So they definitely had some sort of practice that the other ones didn't. Because it just how it actually broke out, and they didn't pull any punches. Like, they really depicted something like this the way it would probably be in this universe. And I just, kudos to those guys for not only doing that, but even just, and this is a comment not just on this episode, although it's definitely true in this episode, the entire season, they actually made the Empire very scary, brutal, dark. You know, it was just something that hasn't been achieved in a long time.
Oh yeah, you definitely feel the oppression of the Empire, and
yeah, right.
You definitely felt just the overwhelming presence that they wanted to create. You know, they made it so it was like, okay, you know, don't let these people get out of line. You know, and they really tried to impose their will. And what I loved was this kid who's building this bomb the whole time just completely unraveled that, you know. And at that point,
that was kind of
literally all hell broke loose after that. And it's just like, okay, now the Empire is like scattered, and now they're not in control anymore. And,
yep. Yeah, and it's true. That was just that one. Well, here's the thing, though. It wasn't really just the bomb. It was the fact that when the bomb went off, it set off all these other little bombs that the Empire had, like part of their weapons cache or something. So, exactly. I don't know if that part was planned.
Oh, no.
I think he was just throwing it or whatever. Yeah, they're probably like, oh, this is kind of cool. So, yeah, that part was cool. But, again, this was all started by Marva. And yeah, when they had the whole thing, and then, little B2 or whatever's getting in position, and this little thing flips, and then he shoots this like big, hologram.
IMAX hologram.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Like a Snoke level hologram over there.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that speech that she gives is just incredible. The fact, because you remember that before she died, she had said, you know what, somebody's got to do something. I'm gonna be a part of this. And then she kind of got snuffed out fairly quickly. And at the time you're thinking, oh, it's almost too bad that she didn't really have time to do much or whatever and join this thing. Maybe Andor will then join in tribute or in honor of her, which he undoubtedly still will. I mean, that narrative still fits. But what was surprising was, it's like, no, Marva had pre-recorded this whole thing, and they did this whole little plan as a means to actually ignite the people. You could say that she's, in a way, another architect of the rebellion. Yeah, another spark. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And she knew that, she knew her position in the community. She knew her reputation and, preceded her. And I just love the fact, that she just, how she led up to it, man. It was just, she talked about how, the honor that it felt to be a part of Ferrix, to be a daughter of Ferrix, to be a stone now, which I think that was the stone that Cassian was leaning on earlier in that episode when he was leaning against the wall and he was having that flashback. Mm-hmm. That guy cleaning parts in their house. I think that was the stone from her house.
Yeah, and that was her dad. That was his dad. That was actually who Clem was, I found out. That part I actually found out by reading another like, 10 million Easter eggs you didn't see in this episode thing, is
Oh,
that
okay.
that was actually his dad telling him. And that was another thing that was, I think, a really important part of this episode was like, you got to be a scavenger. You got to, it was like you were getting a little bit of a window into what makes Andor tick, what motivates him, what is his deal, because mostly through this episode, you don't really see that much. You see him more reacting to his situations than truly being motivated by anything.
Yeah. So with her talking about like just the love that she had for Ferrix, and then she basically talked about the Empire, about like, okay, look, we did all this stuff for them. No one bothered us, and then we let them in, and now they become like rust. They're starting to take over everything, and it's killing not only Ferrix but everywhere else. And then she goes to say that yeah, I'm dead now. I can't stand here with you, but if I could, please believe I would. And the fact that she said I would get up early, I was just like, wow, like this. That's like one of those halftime speeches you get from your coach, man. You're just like, all right, let's put the helmets back on and let's get out there.
It's basically like, today is our Independence Day. It was one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was very much like there was a famous little thing that they used when they were talking about Nazi Germany, and that was, it's kind of that escalation, right? Like how it's just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, and then by the time you realize it, it's too late. And the way it went was the Nazis had the attitude like, okay, you guys are cool, you just can't live among us as Jews. So if you basically renounce your Judaism or whatever, then you're good. Then it became, well, you know what? We don't really like you. You can't live among us. And then it became, you cannot live. See, it's that escalation.
Progression.
And that progression, yeah. Exactly. And that's basically what they were talking about with the Empire, is the fact that the Empire at first, being the legitimate government, being pretty much the Republic, just little different colors, little muted grays, and a little bit more industrial maybe than aesthetically pleasing. But for all intents and purposes, to most of the citizens of the galaxy, it's like, look, we're still, hey, we're that Republic. Now we're about peace and safety for you guys. And we're going to keep everybody in line. And you're going to see it's going to be a better life. And they kind of promise that. And then you start to see with some of these systems, because it's always been about a rebel hero or somebody seeing, kind of like how the Bad Batch did, right? When you watch the Bad Batch, which has a lot of similar themes to this show, you can see that the Bad Batch is looking around, going from system to system, and they're seeing like, oh, the Empire's not really being too cool to a lot of these people. The difference is, now you're actually focusing on a particular area, and you're showing that progression. How in the beginning of the season, the people of Ferrix were like, well, the Empire, they kind of let us do this, and, it's okay. I mean, it's not ideal, but... And then how it's been progressing, how they're getting more and more oppressed with passing time. So, yeah, man. Dwight's got this remark here. He says, I love how the people of Ferrix ignored all the regulations set out by the Empire.
Yeah.
And yeah, they kind of, well, that was the thing. The first thing was when they started the procession earlier than what they were supposed to. That was the first thing to where you knew something was up. And that was almost like their first warning shot across the bow, because you saw all the Imperial bureaucrats just kind of in the office like, hey, man, what's going on? You could almost hear them going, well, the funeral, that doesn't start for another hour. What's, it's...
Yeah.
And again,
then there was only supposed to be 30 people there. That was supposed to be actually.
Yep.
And as you saw, it was way more than 30.
Way more than 30. And it it
Now
just
they had to react to it and just had to like, okay, well, let's hurry up and create some sort of response just in case these people get out of line. We're already in position, but it was already too late at that point.
at that point. But what was interesting about it, and this is what I loved about the episode, and again, that whole impending doom thing, I'm a sucker for it in any kind of film situation or anything like that. Even in real life, I mean, obviously if it's really bad, but like for a bad storm, how everybody's, kind of sort of
Mhm.
preparing for, I don't know, there's just something about it. But that was one of the things I loved about this episode, was the fact that when you looked at it from the Imperial perspective, even though things were happening that were outside of what was allowed, they still really weren't too alarmed about it at the time. It's just kind of like, well, okay, things. It's like they didn't understand what was happening. Well, in case something gets out of hand, we'll just do that. But they were still out there chilling, just like, I wonder what's going on. and then it just unleashes. And you could tell too, because even during most of that Marva speech, they still were just kind of like, here we go. Empire bad, people good, whatever. It was, but it was when it was starting to get a little insightful. When it's like, yeah, rise up against the Empire show. It's like, well, okay, hold on. Let's kill this. Shut that off,
Yeah,
But,
then she said, kill the Empire. Like, I'm like,
yeah.
dang.
Yeah. I mean, it was just kind of like, and again, that's taking a lot for granted too, because you really didn't know what the Empire was going to do. For all you know, they could have just opened fire on everybody as soon as they marched in. You might not even had a chance to play the speech.
Yeah.
But this is another good example of how, I thought that they pulled this off perfectly. And it just shows that minutia of how the rebellion really began on a grassroots level, not just a macro, system-wide or whatever level.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, after the whole the Marva speech, right? And you can see, and that's the thing, like, this, you have this wise sage woman that everyone kind of revered, and she was almost kind of like a mother to everybody else. And so it's kind of like, when you see that, and then you can see how they were they really felt the oppression, when it's like, okay, we couldn't even, you're not even allowing us to bury our own the way we want. That was the last straw for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, you guys have, come in, you guys have taken over this building, this hotel, you guys are torturing people right in, our own neighborhoods. It's like, all right, fine, we'll be cool. But it's like, okay, when one of our own, who we all revere, like, okay, passes, and we want to just send her off the right way just based on tradition. And now you're trying to regulate how we do our traditions. It's like, that was the last straw for the people of Ferrix. And to now hear that their leader, her final words and her final request for them is to, like, no, fight back. It's just like, okay, that's all they needed. And man, that one guy, that one stormtrooper that went up to that tower to deal with that guy with the anvil and got
he
kicked
just
off.
gets
Man,
kicked off.
Remind me of 300, man. Like, this is Sparta.
Oh man, yeah, that was priceless. But you know what? I mean, and again, first of all, it would have been hilarious if Marva had just been like, kill them now. little Revenge of the Sith thing going. But yeah, I mean, and again, it shows when an occupying force overreaches just for the sake of overreaching. Like, there's really no reason to not let them gather and have this funeral the way that they want to have it, based on their traditions. See, this is where, on Aldhani, it was a little bit different. Because that part of the Empire or whatever, the ones that were occupying that planet, did allow them. I mean, they hated it. It's like, we got to go out there. We got to do this whole thing, and it sucks, and it's stupid, but it's kind of what they do. It's kind of like, all right, let them, have this little thing that they like to do, and then, they'll just keep putting up with it. But on Ferrix, though, it was a giant overreach, and there was no reason for it. And that was also part of, I think, what made it easy for them to follow what Marva was saying, because it's like, you know what? It's kind of like you said. We can't even do like our own traditional funeral without these guys. It's like, okay, we're done. And that's what happened. They brought that society to that point, which I also thought was hilarious because so here all this pandemonium breaks out. And then, of course, Andor goes and rescues Bix. And he's not even hiding his face or anything. He's just like carrying her out, and they're just walking in the street or whatever, because things were in such a high disarray that it really didn't matter at this point, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah, it was all smoky too. I mean, you had all this dust kicking up around
Yep.
bombs and stuff going on. People running for their lives. So everybody just trying to get the heck out of there, or take cover from somebody that. He kind of kept his head down, but for the most part, no one even knew.
And nobody
forgot
was
all
looking.
about him.
And that's the thing. This whole season, he's always right there under everybody's nose, and they don't even see it. Ronaldo says the Empire, in all their pride, think that nobody is strong enough to stand up to them, which of course was part of that episode like 6 or something, which happened in both Ferrix and Aldhani.
Yep.
And actually, you can even argue that it goes all the way back to the corporate sector authority on that was on Ferrix too, right?
Well,
yeah, it was.
It's like the outside of Ferrix or something.
It was outside of Ferrix, but I also think that it was like the Empire. Yeah, it was. It was
like a district or something.
Yeah, it was like a district, right? And the corporate sector authority basically answered to the Empire, but they were kind of like a lower subordinate organization or something. Yeah, like a local government. It was basically like they took the the Ferrix local government and said, okay, here, you can manage this small part or whatever. But you could argue that it goes all the way back to that.
Even all the way to the prison, though. Even like, those guys never thought that, okay, no one would ever challenge us. I mean, we have all this, we got these heated floors, we got, these cattle prods, we got this little button we can push to make your body,
well, we're in the middle of some weird ocean too.
Yeah, exactly. So if you did get out, where are you gonna go? I mean, it's so they felt like they had the upper hand, but it's like you just never. And that's one of the things you have to be careful of. A caged animal. It's like, okay, you back a person into a corner. It's either fight or flight, and if they decide to fight, they'll stop at nothing. So you just got to be, mindful.
No, and I mean, until we had this conversation tonight, which is one of the reasons why I love the fact that we do this show, is the fact that I didn't even think about it before, but that's another theme of the show, is pretty much this occupying force, the Empire, thinking that they're so big and they're so powerful that nobody could stand up to them. And that's what made, and of course we brought this up during that episode that when we reviewed it, but when Andor was like, I think the episode was called Nobody's Listening, because he basically said nobody's listening because they don't think we're strong enough. We're not even a threat to them. They don't even care. We could sit there and plot all day and escape and nobody cares. And that's just like the absolute epitome of a hopeless situation. I mean, when your captors pretty much figure like, you know what, things are so hopeless for you that you could, because even in that Sylvester Stallone Schwarzenegger film Escape Plan, which, that prison was like, it's in the middle of a cargo ship. It was like all this multi-level thing. They got all these guys. Even then, they had to be a little bit covert about talking about escaping. But this place is considered to be just so impenetrable, and they're basically under the thumb of this powerful organization that you can openly talk about escaping, and it's totally fine.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that just like Andor said it earlier in the was the first 2 episodes, or maybe in the third, when he was like, yeah, they're so fat and arrogant that they would never think that someone like me would be able to get in, because once again, they're just so arrogant about everything. And we're really starting to see that. But yeah, like I said, they're putting the galaxy pretty much in a fight or flight response, and now that people are choosing to fight back, it's kind of like an alarm to people, and everybody's like, okay, all these little different things are popping up. Even uh Krieger, um, they brought that up in their little meeting, what they brought up with the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And they dropped the Emperor's name again, and like, hey, this is right after the prison break. It's just like, man, the heck is going on out here? First Aldani, now this whole prison break, and then now it's going to be Ferrix. It's like, okay, Ferrix just got away from everybody. It's like the Empire is losing their grip, and they're once again kind of reminds you of what Leia said in A New Hope. The more systems you try to tighten, the more you tighten your grip, the more systems slip through your fingers, and that's essentially what's happening.
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder if they actually, took that line and was like, yeah, we should epitomize this in this show,
Mm-hmm.
And then Dwight, let's see, Dwight and Ronaldo both have something here. Dwight says, and that is exactly what Luthen wanted, the Empire to continue to squeeze. Exactly. He's an instigator. Ronaldo says, I like the detail that everyone from the Empire was dressed in black during the funeral, maybe showing a bit of respect or just protocol. It's probably protocol.
Protocol.
I don't.
They don't care.
Yeah, I don't. Somehow, I'm leaning towards respect not being a thing. But yeah, I mean, I just think that it's really interesting because yes, that did personify the fact that they keep tightening their grip and all these star systems keep slipping out. And I think that's you're starting to see why the rebellion acted the way they did and why they did certain things in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious because Leia essentially in A New Hope is supposed to be around the time or around the age of that Carrie Fisher was, 19. And she was a senator since she was like 14 or 13 or something. So technically, she should be a senator, like just starting her Senate career at the time of Andor. So I'm really curious on how, now again for season 2, I know there's going to be tons of time jumps. That was one of the things that I was reading about it, where they said that the episodes were going to jump significantly, actually. They're still going to do that whole like trilogy thing to where, a story arc per 3 episodes, but each story arc is going to jump because obviously they got to get up to the whole Rogue One thing.
Rogue One.
And what I'm really curious about is, like, I'm not entirely sure from episode 1 of season 1 of Andor to the season finale how much time has actually passed. Had to be significant. He was in prison for a while. So I'd have to try to look that up.
Speaking of which, did you catch the end credits?
I read about them. I did not actually sit and watch them. So I know the whole thing is that, and look, we knew that's what it was going to be. I mean, they start out, they show a close-up of the machinery, they pull back, and it reveals that what they were actually building was part of the weapon, of the Death Star. But actually, what was interesting was, and this is something when I read it, I didn't realize, it was actually the second Death Star that they were building. Which, of course, makes sense, because they started building the first Death Star after episode, like, Attack of the Clones. So I thought it was actually cool that they were addressing the construction of Death Star 2.
Well, that doesn't make sense, though.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense because you can't... Look, so in between episode 4 and 5 is 1 year. And pretty much there's like, I think 2 years maybe between Empire and Return of the Jedi. So, it takes decades basically for them to build one of these things. So they had already started. I forgot when they actually said, because this was like a trivia thing back in the day where when they actually started building the second Death Star. Because, obviously during Return of the Jedi, it's not done. It's mostly done, but the weapon system was there. Because...
Well, the reason why I say it doesn't make sense is because if you watch this episode, well, you watch the end credits of this episode, the sphere of the Death Star is completed. They're just finishing the dish. They're just finishing the actual weapon part. So that's what I'm saying. If that were the case, it doesn't match Return of the Jedi.
Right, because Return of the Jedi is like, it's still...
Yeah, you still, like half a station basically. But,
and Ronaldo's basically correcting all that too.
Yeah, and then even with Rogue One, they were just completing it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they were putting the little dish thingy into the...
Yeah, and that makes sense because this is what they're working on. So when you get to the end of Rogue One, which explains the, although this is not canon, which explains why the hilarious robot chicken thing makes so much sense and it's so hilarious when the little Palpatine was just like, I wasn't finished paying on that thing yet, and it's already, because it's like, if you really think about it, it's like the Death Star really hasn't been in operation that long and it's already blown up already.
Yeah, it was blown up like, well, I mean, if you think about it, Rogue One takes place, it was just built. It was just, because remember, they tested it on Alderaan. That was just like...
Tested it, well,
the full power.
Big test.
Yeah, they didn't. Right. The full power was tested on Alderaan.
Right.
It was, kind of like the little test was
Jeddah and Scarif.
Yep.
But
so I mean,
that's something that it makes more sense. And when you stop and think about it, it's like, dang man, like I know the Emperor really had to be ticked because it's like, I just got the super weapon built. I mean, fortunately, he had the foresight
years
to already start building the other one anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the idea
whole plan was to have multiple Death Stars,
have a fleet of
spots to get.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, but the one that was actually operational,
I know,
was already kind of
right out the gate. Like it's just freshly built. Supposed to be the super weapon that nobody could destroy. Again, arrogance of the Empire. And of course, Luke points that out. When he and Palpatine had that little kid fight.
Yeah. Overconfidence is your weakness. Your faith in your
friends is yours. It's like, oh yeah?
Your mama.
Yeah, right. Vader's like, watch your mouth. She was a good woman.
Right. That is true.
You take that back.
Now. Right. Hey now.
Padme was and just starts like going off on this whole thing. Oh man, I almost wish that had happened, or at least they did a Robot Chicken skit on that one. That would have been awesome, dude. Wow. So yeah, that whole thing was cool, and again, it was nice that they did that. It was nice that they put that little epilogue in there to kind of show. But again, I mean,
building the whole time.
Yeah, and it was we kind of knew that anyway. And I mean, it had been rumored for a while, but I mean, and that's what made sense. I mean, I guess they could have been building anything. I mean, the Empire has a lot of weapon systems. It's got a lot of different machines. They could have been building TIE fighter parts. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, we pretty much knew, look, it's going to tie in. Plus, if it ties into Rogue One, it makes sense to do that anyway, because the Death Star was the big deal in that one, so yeah. So, well, I don't know, let's rate the episode first, and then do our thoughts for Season 2. So, final thoughts for this episode and your rating.
Final thoughts. I thought this was a really good episode. I liked a lot of the different monologues that we got in there. Of course, Marva's, both of Marva's, the one that she actually delivered to the people of Ferrix, but also the one she had, memorized by that Andor's friend that he recanted to him. I think those were great. The the tension in this episode was really great. I love the awkward, creepy, romantic vibe between Cyril and Deidre, of course, and I can't wait to see more of that. Uh, I liked just how everything played out. Nothing was really too over the top. There's only one over the top moment, and that was when the friend headbutted the stormtrooper, and I was like, really? Like, that was stupid, but
Yeah, I
um,
know. I know. That
but
was.
outside of that, though, I think if I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give this one a 9.
All right. Well, Ronaldo, of course, in the grand tradition of his funky little ratings. Well, one's not so funky. He gives it completely love this episode. I give it a 9.5. And the show, that's actually a good point. We should also rate the season. And the show, a 9.8. Dwight, it's 9 out of 10 for me. Okay, Dwight, how would you rate the entire season? Daryl, you give this episode a 9, but how would you rate the entire season?
9.5.
Okay. For me, I'm going to give this episode probably, I think, a solid 9. Because, again, I mean, I agree with pretty much almost verbatim. Not trying to take the lazy way out or anything, but, I mean, you pretty much said it. You know, all this stuff. And one of the things that I really liked about it, and you touched on this, is the fact that it was not over the top. It was very, very even. And this is another thing that I have to stress. And this is especially true for the last 4 or 5 episodes. Can't say that about the first 3. But at least the last 3, 4, maybe even the last half of the season, the pacing's really good. I mean, this is a really well-paced show. And I really enjoyed everything about this. Now, again, now that we've seen the entire season, I really honestly think that this season, or this series even, more than any of the other ones, maybe for season 2 it'll be a little bit different, but I think this one could have benefited more from binging than the week-to-week. Only because, you know, Dwight. So, Dwight, in the grand tradition for the season, mind you, follows Ronaldo's lead and gives it a 9.567. Maybe we should give it a 3.14, and so it'll be like pi or something. Ronaldo says, and I'll say this, best Star Wars I've seen since the original trilogy. And then Dwight also comes in and says, Andor was very believable and well written. Yeah, I mean, all these are really good points.
I agree.
You know, and it's one of those things where I think that this is really what you wanted from all the other shows. I still have to say that for me, I think I still like The Mandalorian better. Because you have to remember that the one thing that's missing from this show, and I don't necessarily think that it has to lack this to be an adult Star Wars show, it's missing the fun. It's missing the fun, and you could still do that, because look, the Mission Impossible movies are fun. Some of the Tom Clancy movies have a little bit of a fun thing. But again, I mean, I get it. That's not what they were going for. They were going more for a gritty, somber. They basically wanted to serialize Rogue One. That's really what they were looking to do. It's more Saving Private Ryan, you know. That's not fun. Platoon was not fun. There's a lot of movies
Full
out
Metal
there.
Jacket.
Yeah, Full Metal Jacket, exactly. Full Metal Jacket's not exactly the most fun film either, and that's really more the tone they were going for, so it was spot on. So now, question for our people that are chatting in the audience that you still have maybe 20, 30 seconds, depending on how long our answers are. And then, of course, in the comments section, well, we'll talk about that at the end of the show. Season 2. What do you want to see? Yeah, we don't even have to say what we think we're going to see, but what do you want to see? Unless you want to talk about that too. Not only what you want to see, but what you think we'll see. I know.
What do I want to see versus what I think I want to see? I want to see, like I said, the continuation of Deidre and Cyril. I want to see, okay, what's the next steps of the rebel. I can't say alliance yet because they're not unified really.
Yeah,
So,
it's a little too early for an alliance. Well, you know what though?
but I want to see
Because
what.
this thing does butt up against Rogue One though, so they have to be an alliance. I mean, it's true during Rogue One, particularly the Battle of Scarif, they really were unified, but they were still an alliance before that. I mean, they had ranks within the thing. They were all in the same room. They were, debating, but they were there.
Yeah, I would like to see. Honestly, I would like to see Krennic pop up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be cool to eventually bring him in to season 2. I would like to see like the depth of my Mothma now. Like I really want to see her fully step out there and just how she starts to really truly cultivate the empire. I mean, the rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would echo a lot of those. Cyril and Deidre, I really want to know. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of the Empire version of Anakin and Padme over here. The creepiness, the everything, and tied to that too. You really want to see where Deidre's journey and Cyril's journey independently are going to go, as well as maybe how that converges and they end up together. I mean, because we don't see them. So you almost have to, I guess you don't really have to, but it would be nice to explain their absence maybe, a little bit anyway. Yeah, obviously, where's the rebellion going to go? But I think that's obvious. I mean, there's some things that I think are going to happen. Like, for instance, I'd be tempted to say, well, I want to see, Cassian meeting and reprogramming and befriending K2SO. But I already know we're going to see that. So it's not, I mean, I want to, obviously, but something else that, you didn't mention, but I would kind of like to see, although it's kind of tough. I mean, I'll preface it like this. So there was some people were complaining about this, about season 1, where they said that Andor, in some ways, is almost a side character in his own show. And if you really think back, he kind of is. I mean, what he is he's the central character. And I think that this is where people kind of veer off a little bit. Andor is the central figure, but we're not focused on him all the time. We're basically focused on these other characters and how they're affected by him. And then, of course, we're seeing Andor's journey interwoven into that. And sort of how he affects those around him. Which, if you think about it, is kind of what he does in Rogue One. He's a side character there, too. I mean, granted, it's not called Andor, though, but, I mean, it's still
true.
It's really more how he affects Jyn Erso's character. So there's a little bit of a similarity there, that Andor, in and of himself, he's not so much the hero or even the anti-hero. He's really more of a catalyst, which is where I was going with this conversation. I'd kind of like to see some elements of the novel Catalyst in there, because Catalyst is a prequel to Rogue One, and a really good one, by the way. Now, it focuses more on Galen Erso, Krennic, a little bit with Jyn, but you brought up you wanted to see a little bit of Krennic in there, and I think that this would be an opportunity to maybe brush, maybe not necessarily make, obviously they could just make a Catalyst movie if they wanted to, but maybe just brush some of the plot points, almost Lion King 1.5 it, It's from Andor's perspective, but this is what's going on. Okay, the chats have kind of exploded for some reason, so let me see what's going on over here. Ronaldo says, I want to see an organic path from here to Rogue One. And what is Luthen's fate? Probably dead. That's a good point. We really don't... I mean, Luthen's a big character, so where is he? I mean, let's face it, the truth is he wasn't written yet, but remember, in-universe. The characters are so well written that we legit want to know what happened to all of them before Rogue One. Absolutely. Dwight says, it's supposed to pick up 1 year after these events. Okay. So season 2 picks up 1 year after season 1. But how long was season 1? Like, what's the span of time there? Is it 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? What's going on? We know it's going up to the early events of Rogue One, so I want to see how the factions are brought in. What are they going to use to bring the threads together? That's a good point, too. Because, you got Saw Gerrera over there, you got all these other guys. Ronaldo says, I don't think he's a side character. It's just the other characters are so great and important that it might feel that way. Dwight is saying, well, Andor, like Rogue One, is an ensemble cast. Yeah, that's really more what the point is. More about the total whole. Absolutely. It's like the first season of Game of Thrones where Ned Stark was a protagonist, but the other characters had a lot of story and were very interesting. On the fact that he was, like, killed off in, like, what, the 5th episode, 4th, 2nd? Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like they set him up to be the dude. And then, well, I guess that's not happening. Then season 1 is reported to be about 6 months. Okay, that was the main question. So there's 6 months between episode 1 and episode 12. And that makes sense. And then we're going to go 1 year after that, and that's where season 2 is going to pick up. And then, of course, there's going to be serious time jumps in there. So, yeah, I mean, overall, again, I mean, this is a really, really good season. Great show. Definitely looking, unfortunately, we're not going to get it till like 2024, though, which just absolutely destroys me. Because it's like,
unfortunately,
really,
we do have a bunch of other great Star Wars content.
We do, and it won't feel that way because it's true. We got like Ahsoka coming up, we got the Acolyte coming up, we got season 3 of The Mandalorian. So yeah, I mean, it's not
gonna keep us busy.
It's gonna keep us busy for a minute, and I mean, who knows? Season 2 of The Bad Batch is supposed to come out too, so we're gonna have a lot to review. So we'll see, but yeah, Ronaldo's like, 2024, that sucks. Yeah, it does. But you know what? I will say this. If it means that we get a really good quality show, 2024 it is. Because we see what happens, sequel trilogy, I'm talking to you, what happens when you rush things. All right, well, wow, you guys got like 3 shows from us this week. Like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. This is like the 3rd show this week. It's pretty wild.
A workout schedule.
Yeah, right? It's kind of like, man, I just saw you. But you know what? I mean, it was fun. This is a really great little holiday week. I mean, it was great to have Dave Cassian on for our yearly Thanksgiving special. It's always fun doing stuff with him. So, if you guys are liking what you see, I mean, you have enough content to watch this week to see if, you're into it or whatever. But this is what we do. Every Monday and Friday at 8 o'clock. We jump on live, jump on with all you guys, talk a bunch of Star Wars, and just kind of have fun and chill. So, Monday, obviously, we're going to do the Tales of the Jedi review. We're on episode 5, so we're getting close to being done with that, too. We only have 2 more episodes that we have. Oh, and David's back. He's like, sorry I'm so late. The finale was okay. Contain your excitement a little bit there, David. Well, the cool thing is, you know what? You can go back. Man, this is kind of like a longer episode, man. We're past an hour and a half. So you can always catch up. Because again, for those of you who did not get a chance to see this live, like mostly David, right? Just jumping in the last few minutes. Check it out. Leave a comment. Let us know if you liked the show, if you liked the episode. What's your favorite part? What do you think they need to improve? I mean, there's all kinds of things that we can talk about. So leave your comments in the comment section, what you think about the show. And, of course, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. And I guess that's it for tonight. So we'll see you guys Monday night, live at 8, when we do Tales of the Jedi Episode 5. Which probably won't be, and it won't be as good as Episode 4, right? I mean, is it downhill from there? Oh, it still gets good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, I'll definitely watch it before we do the review, right? So with that,
that would be most helpful.
that would probably be a good idea. I mean, look at what happened because I only read about and didn't see the last end credit scene of Andor. Not doing that again. All right, so with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.